from Substance to Maya, what we're going to go over is we're going to go over how to activate the FBX exporter. And we're going to go over how to set the settings to get the export out. We're also going to look at how your UVs need to be set up for working in Substance, because certain rules that work just fine in Maya are not going to work in Substance. We're also going to check to make sure we're not in 3 mode, because whenever you export anything from Maya, 3 mode smoothing does not apply. And this is why, if you guys have ever seen me around 3DF, you'll notice that I hate 3 mode smoothing because I work in game engines. And when you work in Unity or Unreal, or when you go to Substance, 3 mode smoothing's out the window. So we're going to look at the old school way of smoothing a model, because we'll need to do that when we go between applications. Alright guys, so here we have our night scene for the exterior. Now we have our cutting board, which is what we're going to focus on. You should have your textures already in process and applied. I actually had to restore to a previous file that I didn't have textures on, and weirdly when I put textures on it, it breaks the UV editor. Maya. But that's why we don't have textures on here. Again, you want to have your tileable textures done and working in RenderMan before you move on to Substance. So make sure those are already in RenderMan looking somewhat pretty good. Now, one of the problems we have, if we look at our UVs for our cutting board, is we have this little section here overlapping. And that is no bueno, not good at all. Because when we're texture painting in Substance or texture painting on 3D, and it doesn't know what to do with this when you start painting in that area, it's like, but it's also over here, so it kind of messes it up. So what we're going to do is really simple. We're just going to take the UV shell, and we're going to rotate it. And we're going to shrink it down and just kind of put it over here out of the way. It's the bottom side of the cutting board, and we're not going to see it in our render, so shrinking it down and moving it out of the way is not a big deal. You have to make sure to do that with all your UVs. I don't think any of the other ones are a problem. I know the bread is... Why can't I select the cheese? So the knife actually needs UVs. It doesn't have any, so you'll need to project UVs on that. The knife handle doesn't have any UVs by default. The cheese does, but some of them are outside 0 to 1. So you'll need to make sure they're inside this 0 to 1 area. So you'll have to do some UV editing for things that you bring in. Those are the only assets I recommend looking at. Oh, besides the tablecloth. The tablecloth is fine. And it disappeared. Why does the UV editor hate me? Now, one thing to be careful of is that a lot of these assets are using Maya's 3-key smoothing, which you learned about how to use in MCR. When we export out of Maya, 3-key smoothing is not a thing in any other application. So Substance, Unreal, Unity, not a thing. So we have to make sure that we actually go in and smooth things the old school way. So the cheese, for example, if we press 1, it changes shape. The bread is another one, completely looks really terrible. The tablecloth, at least. This one, if we press 1, it gets all weird and pokes through the table. It actually pokes through itself, so you have to make sure to smooth that. The knife, this one's going to completely change. So I'm going to show you guys how to actually fix that. And it's actually pretty simple. So we just select any object and we go to Mesh and we go to Smooth. Sometimes I have to do it twice. With the knife we can get away with it once. The bread we just do it once. The cheese, which is really hard to select. The tablecloth, we can just do it once. The cheese, we can just do it once. I'm just pressing the G key. The cutting board is perfect as is. We don't need to adjust that one. We're fortunate there. And now these assets are now ready to export. We're only going to export the cutting board, but if you want to export multiple assets, just select, shift select more. I actually kind of like the tablecloth, the bread, the knife, the cutting board, and the cheese. Those are all fun to bring into Substance, but focus on one. If you can get one working good, maybe do two. In order to export these models, we're going to need to turn on the FBX exporter. So we go into the plugin manager, scroll down, and eventually we will find FBX Maya bundle. Mine's already loaded, but you would have to check that. Then go to export selection. And so we tell it where to go, and I'm just going to name this cutting board demo, and then it'll open up the exporter. You want to make sure you're not exporting animation. This will be checked by default. Uncheck it. We don't have animation, so we don't want to bother exporting it. Aside from that, all the defaults should be fine. Just press export. This error will come up. It's saying, I can't export some materials. That's okay. Don't worry about it. So what we now have is our cuttingboard.fbx file. I have this, which we'll also look at in the demo. I have a couple of reasons why I have this. This is a file that just has a couple more assets, like the cutting board, the bread, the cheese, the knife, and the bottle, as well as the tablecloth. With that done, we are now ready to take these files and head into Substance. Exciting.